It was the 53rd year of the Dishwan era. Early spring had arrived in the capital, and the heavy snow that had blanketed the city all winter was finally starting to melt. Even so, the wind cutting through the courtyard of the Jindong Marquis estate was still bone-chilling. I stood in the center of the yard, wearing nothing but thin clothes. Sweat poured down my face as I swung my long blade, refusing to let the cold slow me down. My face was flushed, and the blood in my veins felt like it was boiling. I kept my eyes focused and my grip tight. The blade glowed a faint crimson, slicing through the air and leaving shimmering trails behind, as if I were cutting the wind itself into pieces. As I moved, small lines of glowing text appeared in my vision. Successful swing. Basic blade technique proficiency +1. Successful swing. Basic blade technique proficiency +1. I didn't stop. I pushed harder until a new notification flashed before my eyes. Basic blade technique reached perfection. You have gained insight into the advanced technique, Shoyang Demon Breaking Blade. Your blood chi has reached the peak of the 9th grade. Breakthrough now? A grin spread across my face. I felt the crimson blade in my hand vibrate, and the energy inside me surged violently. Strands of blood chi actually began to leak out of my pores, coalescing behind my back into the shape of a massive, burning red sun. It looked like the first sunrise of a new world, piercing through primordial darkness with raw, blistering heat. My body trembled. I felt like I was made of molten lava. My power reached its absolute limit, feeling as though it could boil the very oceans. I didn't hesitate. I swung the blade one more time. The atmosphere in the courtyard shifted instantly. It was as if winter had vanished and midsummer had arrived in a single stroke. I heard a sharp crack inside my body, like an invisible shackle snapping apart. My boiling blood found its outlet, rushing through my meridians like a river crashing into the sea. My momentum peaked. I had done it. I was now in the 8th grade refined spirit realm. I opened my eyes, and for a split second, a golden light flickered in my pupils. It looked as if I had double pupils merging into one, but the image vanished as quickly as it appeared. I took a deep breath, pulling my aura back inside until I looked like just another ordinary teenager. I had been in this world for 2 months now. Finally, I had reached the 8th grade. I couldn't help but smile. 2 months ago, I realized I had logged into this world way ahead of schedule. In my past life, this was a mysterious game that had appeared on Earth out of nowhere. No one knew where it came from, only that the Chosen could enter this hyper-realistic world. Right now, the Great Wu dynasty was under the rule of Emperor 1. I didn't know much about this specific era because when the game officially launched in my previous life, the Empress was already on the throne. I was currently in the middle of a power struggle between 2 princes. In 5 years, the 3rd prince would launch a coup. He would lead his army through the White Tiger Gate, slaughter the crown prince, and go on a bloody rampage through the palace. But he wouldn't be the winner. I tried to recall the details. In my old life, I joined during the first public beta, 6 years into the Empress's reign. I only knew the broad strokes of what happened before then. People thought this was a fight between 2 princes, but there was a hidden dragon waiting in the shadows. 5 years from now, during that bloody night, the 2nd princess would descend like a god from heaven. Holding the ancestral sword, she would lead her cavalry through the gates and paint the snow red with the blood of her enemies. By the time the sun rose, the emperor, the crown prince, the 3rd prince, and every male heir to the throne would be dead. The Great Wu would welcome its first empress, and a glorious new age would begin. Is it because of this jade seal? I muttered, looking at my palm. A faint imprint of a jade seal was etched into my skin like a totem. Only I could see it. 9 dragons were carved onto it, breathing out primordial mist. Purple energy swirled around it, and I could catch glimpses of the sun, the moon, and the stars orbiting the center. I tried to look closer, but the seal went dark, shielding its secrets from me. I exhaled a long breath and calmed my heart. Whatever this seal was, my priority was strength. The current government was a mess, and bandits were everywhere. The country was fractured, but for me, that was an opportunity. Heroes are born in times of chaos. I had to move fast. Once the Empress took the throne, she would crush the rebellions and unify the nation. Life would be safer then, but opportunities for a quick rise would vanish. Under her rule, everyone, monks, Taoists, and even players, would have to bow down. I grabbed a bucket of water and a towel to wash the sweat from my skin. My starting position in this life wasn't bad. I was born into the Jindong Marquis estate. Our family history was legendary. Hundreds of years ago, when the capital fell, the first Marquis, Xia Xuanjun, rose from a common soldier to a god-tier general. He led a daring cavalry charge across thousands of miles to take the enemy's head and save the dynasty. The emperor had praised him as the greatest in the world. People said he deserved to be a king, but since he wasn't part of the royal bloodline, he was named the Marquis of Jindong instead. 17 generations later, the family was still prosperous. Even though I wasn't particularly valued within the household, being a member of such a powerful clan gave me a massive head start. I wasn't going to waste it. I was satisfied with my starting position. In my past life, I'd heard of beta testers who spawned in as nameless nobodies or even beggars on the street. Usually, the earlier you entered this game, the worse your identity was to maintain balance, but I had broken that rule. I was born into a family of high-ranking nobility. The sound of hurried footsteps broke my concentration. A young servant in light clothes rushed into the courtyard, gasping for air. His face was flushed bright red, though I couldn't tell if it was from the biting cold wind or the sprint. This was Xia Qian. He had been by my side since he was 4 years old. We had spent 12 years together. Technically, he was a distant relative from a branch of the family that split off 200 years ago, but because he carried the Xia name, he was sent to the estate to be raised alongside the direct bloodline. Third young master. A letter. It's from the second master. Xia Qian panted, a look of genuine joy on his face. The second master finally remembered you. If I recall correctly, the last letter came 3 years ago. I took the letter calmly. I felt no excitement, only a hint of curiosity. Did something happen outside? I asked. To go 3 years without a word, and then suddenly write. It's strange. Young master, you're as sharp as ever, Xia Qian exclaimed, his eyes shining. It's great news. The second master slayed a third-grade great demon in the Eastern Desolation. It was a local overlord. After that battle, the demon hordes retreated 100 miles. The chaos in the east is finally being cleared out. Our nation's might is restored. Xia Qian was only 16, a year younger than me. He spoke with such passion you'd think he was the one who swung the blade. Everyone is saying the east will be fully pacified within a year or two. When that happens, the second master and the second mistress can finally lead the army back to the capital. He looked at me with emotion in his eyes. After 14 years, you'll finally be reunited with your family. I didn't share his joy. Unlike other players who just logged in, I had inherited all of the original Xia Qian's memories and emotions. I didn't just feel like a guest in this body. I felt like I had lived his life and only recently awakened my memories of Earth. In my mind, the image of my father, Xia Yuan, surfaced. He was the Marquis of Dongan. In my earliest memories, before I was 3, he had doted on me. But everything changed during the martial aptitude test when I was 3 years old. I was labeled a waste body, someone born without the talent for cultivation. My father had gone silent for a long time after that. Eventually, he looked at me with a hardened gaze and promised that since I was his eldest son, he would find a way to change my fate, no matter the cost. The very next day, a demon tide broke out in the Eastern Desolation. My father was appointed commander-in-chief of the 100,000-strong Eastern Army. My mother, Su Xiaoxue, a powerful sorceress, went with him. I was only 3. I cried and begged to go, but they refused. They said it was too dangerous. They left me behind in the Marquis estate, and they hadn't returned for 14 years. For the first 3 months, letters and demon blood for body tempering arrived regularly. After 5 months, the letters slowed down. At the time, I told myself the war was just getting intense. But a year later, I overheard the servants talking. My mother had become pregnant again just a month after reaching the front lines. Once my younger brother was born, the letters dropped to once every 6 months. By the time I was 6, they stopped sending resources entirely. I tried to believe my father was just too busy as a commander. Then, the news reached the estate. My younger brother, born on the battlefield and raised by my parents' side, was a prodigy. He had transcendental bones. That was when the original Xiachun realized he had been abandoned. I had grown used to my freedom as a nobody in the estate. My uncle and aunt treated me well enough, and I didn't have to deal with the cliché drama of bullying servants. But now, my parents were coming back. They were bringing my brother, Xiahao, a boy I'd never met who possessed the legendary Supreme Bone. In the coming era of spiritual recovery, that bone would shine with world-shaking power. 14 years apart meant we were strangers who happened to share blood. The servants in the house knew more about my parents' achievements than I did. "You can go now," I told Xiaqian, nodding, "and tell the kitchen to double my lunch portions again." Xiaqian blinked in surprise. "Double again? Young master, that's enough food for 20 people." "I'm training hard," I said with a small smile. "I need the energy." Once he was gone, I looked down at the yellowed envelope. It was embossed with a Qilin pattern. I ran the edge of my red blade across my finger and let a drop of hot blood fall onto the seal. The Qilin pattern shimmered, and for a second, I heard a faint, ghostly roar. This was my mother's handiwork. In this era, the world hadn't fully transitioned to high magic, but there were still powerful figures. A single warrior could hold off an army. A single arrow could part a river. People generally fell into two categories: warriors and sorcerers. In my gamer terms, I thought of them as fighters and mages. My mother was one of the latter. The letter was sealed specifically for me. Only my blood could unlock it. It was a clever bit of sorcery, the kind of magic those crude warriors could never master. I opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of fine Xian paper. It felt smooth and delicate against my fingers, but there were only a few words written on it. "I will return home in 6 months to 2 years. At that time, I will arrange your marriage. You are my son. When you meet the second princess, perform well. Do not tarnish the dignity of the Marquis's estate." She was a woman of few words. That was my first thought. I wasn't surprised by the first half of the message. The war in the eastern wilderness had lasted 14 years. A 9th-rank demon had been slain, and with only a handful of such powerful creatures in the world, the victory was absolute. It made sense that my parents were finally coming home. But the second half of the letter made my pupils shrink. She wanted me to marry the second princess. In the future I remembered from the game, that girl wasn't just royalty. She was the future empress. I stood in the courtyard, the spring breeze carrying a sharp chill that matched the unease in my heart. The empress was the most powerful figure in the Great Unification era. She was a legend who suppressed the world, gathered the destiny of the land, and transformed the Great Wu dynasty into a divine realm. Under her rule, the very air favored her subjects, speeding up their cultivation while outsiders struggled to breathe. I tried to recall the details of the game's plot. Back then, I had treated this world like a playground, skimming through the early lore. It wasn't until the worlds merged and death became permanent that I started paying attention. But even then, I had never heard of the Empress having a fiancé. Then, a memory clicked. In the future, my younger brother Xiahao would become the pillar of the empire. He was the supreme bone, genius, the sharpest spear in the Empress's army. There had been rumors, whispers that Xiahao was only made a king because the Empress owed a debt to the Xia family. People said she had been betrothed to a common member of the Marquis's estate during her rise to power, but that man had died in a bloody coup before she took the throne. I looked at the letter again, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. That common member, whose name was erased from history, it was me. I was the dark history, the forgotten fiancé who had to die so the Empress's image could remain spotless. My eyes shimmered, the double pupils merging as a faint, chaotic mist swirled within them. A cold light flashed in my gaze. So, my role in this story was to be killed off during the coup? No wonder I never heard of a brother named Xiachun in my past life. I calmed my breathing, my expression turning as still as deep well water. I went inside and changed into a set of fine robes. I didn't have any maids to help me. In our household, once a boy turned 12, the servants were removed to prevent us from breaking our essence before reaching the 8th rank. It was a rule meant to keep our focus on martial arts, away from the temptations of the flesh. As I stepped out of my courtyard, a beautiful young woman in a green silk dress approached me. Her name was Baiju. "Third young master, the master and madam are asking for you," she said, bowing respectfully. She didn't look down on me like the arrogant servants you see in stories. I understand, I nodded. I followed her, and as I watched her walk, I felt a sudden surge of heat in my blood. I was at the peak of my vitality after my breakthrough, and my body was reacting to everything. I quickly looked away, focusing my mind on the family tree to distract myself. The Marquis' estate had stood for 600 years. My grandfather, the old Marquis Xiachutian, was 86 but still full of vigor, though he spent all his time in secluded cultivation. He had 3 sons. The eldest, Xia Qian, ran the household. My father, Xia Yuan, was the second son. Then there was the third, Xia Han. Baizhu led me through the winding paths of the outer courtyard and into the main hall. Sitting in the seat of honor was a dignified middle-aged man and a woman in her 30s who carried herself with effortless grace. "Uncle, Aunt," I said, bowing low. "Chinner, we're family. No need for such formality," Xia Qian said with a warm smile. His wife, Cui Mingru, gave me a playful, reproachful look. "It's been so long since you've eaten with us. Are you becoming distant because you heard your mother is coming back?" "I've just been focused on my training, Aunt. I didn't mean to neglect you," I said, sitting down beside her. A wave of genuine warmth washed over me. My biological mother might have ignored me for 14 years to focus on my genius brother, but my uncle and aunt had truly cared for me. They never looked down on me for being a trash body. If I had grown up without misery in this house, it was because of them. Their smiles widened when they heard I was finally taking my martial arts training seriously. Their smiles faded quickly, replaced by a lingering shadow of pity. They sighed, and I knew exactly what they were thinking. Even if a trash body like mine practiced martial arts, I'd never achieve anything great. No matter how much effort I poured in, the results would always be pathetic. Xia Qian and Cui Mingru started asking if I needed anything: clothes, medicine, or money. For a moment, with the 3 of us chatting and laughing, it actually felt like we were a real family. But then Xia Qian's expression turned serious. He leaned in, dropping the small talk. "Your father has achieved great things in the East," he said. "The Emperor has granted a marriage contract. He's betrothed the second princess to you. You've heard about this, right?" I nodded slowly. "I just found out." "What do you think about it?" Xia Qian asked. I looked him straight in the eye. "Is there any room for negotiation? Any way out?" I didn't want to marry a princess. To an outsider, it sounded like a dream, but for a family like ours, it was a golden cage. It would restrict my every move. Most importantly, that princess was the future empress. Marrying her was suicide. I still didn't know how I died in my past life, but I knew being near her was dangerous. My biological parents had abandoned me for 14 years while they fought wars in the East. They didn't care about me. My uncle and aunt were the ones who raised me since I was 3. They were my real parents. "You don't want to marry her?" Cui Mingru asked softly, her eyes searching mine. "No," I said firmly. I didn't hesitate. Xia Qian sighed and shook his head. "There's no turning back now. The Imperial decree has already left the palace gates. It should be arriving at our estate any minute." I went silent. I knew how the world worked. In this game of power, I was a pawn. My opinion didn't matter, even though I was the one getting married. It was ridiculous. "This marriage wasn't originally meant for you," Cui Mingru added, her voice filled with hesitation. "The emperor wanted your younger brother, Xia Hao. But when the messenger reached the east, your father refused. He said Xia Hao was too young and needed to focus on his martial arts." She paused, watching my reaction. "Your father wrote back to the emperor, suggesting that as the eldest son, you were the better match. The emperor thought about it for 3 days. This morning, he finally agreed." I felt a coldness settle in my chest. My parents didn't want to ruin their genius son's future, so they threw me to the wolves instead. To them, Xia Hao was the future of the family, a prodigy who could lead armies. I was just the spare part they could trade away to satisfy the emperor. In this empire, marrying into the royal family meant your career was over. 600 years ago, relatives of the empress had nearly toppled the throne. Since then, the law was clear. Husbands of princesses could never hold significant power or command armies. If Xia Hao married her, his talent would be wasted. But me? I was the trash. To my father and even my uncle, becoming a pampered puppet of the court was the best I could hope for. It kept the family safe and ensured I lived a life of luxury. I forced a smile, hiding the bitterness inside. I understood the logic, but it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. My own parents had used me as a shield to protect their favorite child. Even the future empress was being used as a political tool right now. If she couldn't escape her fate yet, how could I? But this only made me more determined. I needed power. I needed to control my own destiny. Suddenly, Baiju hurried into the hall. She looked composed, but her pace was fast. "Master, madam," she whispered. "The palace officials are here. Eunuch Yi is leading them personally." Xiaqian and Cui Mingru stood up immediately. "Chinner," my uncle said, "come with us to receive the decree." I stood up and followed them toward the main gates. Outside, I saw him, Eunuch Yi. His hair was snow-white, but his skin was as smooth as a child's. He stood there with an aura that commanded respect. This was Yi Wujing. He had served 3 emperors and would survive the bloody coups of the future to guard the palace for the empress herself. He was a monster in disguise, a true powerhouse of the Great Wu. And he was here to hand me my golden handcuffs. The emperor's loyal servant. The title flashed through my mind as I looked at the man before me. This was the eldest son of the Marquis of Anong, a man of striking presence. Eunuch Yi smiled warmly at me. "Congratulations," he said, his voice smooth and welcoming. I knew this man's future. I knew that during the upcoming bloody coup, he would be the one to shine, eventually becoming the Empress's most trusted guardian. I didn't treat him like a mere servant. I bowed deeply, showing him genuine respect. Yi seemed surprised by my gesture. Most noble sons were arrogant, but I saw his eyes soften. He nodded back, clearly forming a good first impression of me. I might have been the protagonist of this story, but I knew that in the grand scheme of things, I was currently just a pawn who needed to show his face. We led Eunuch Yi into the Marquis's manor. What followed was a blur of exhausting tradition. I had to bathe, change into formal robes, and prepare myself for the official ceremony. Then, Eunuch Yi read the Imperial decree aloud. I knelt and accepted the scroll. With that single act, the marriage was officially set in stone. The process left my head spinning. Usually, Imperial decrees were just spoken words or simple messages, but a royal marriage was different. It required every tedious rule and ritual in the book to show respect to both the Marquis's house and the princess. By the time we finished, it was already late afternoon. I stood there, clutching the dragon-patterned scroll. It was heavy, made of a material I didn't recognize. It all felt like a dream. I was officially the fiancé of the future empress. But a dark thought nagged at me. Could I really survive the coming coup? Was my death in the original timeline really just an accident? I looked at my uncle and aunt walking ahead of me. I couldn't afford to be passive anymore. I picked up my pace and caught up to them. "Uncle," I said, my voice steady and loud. "I've broken through. I've reached the 8th rank, the essence refining realm. I want to find a position. I want to serve the country." They both froze. They turned around, their faces masked with pure shock. "You reached the 8th rank?" Xiaqian asked, his voice rising in disbelief. Normally, an 18-year-old reaching the 8th rank was impressive, but not unheard of. In the outside world, I'd be a genius. But in a house full of monsters like the Marquis's manor, the 8th rank was usually nothing special. However, I was the exception. My uncle knew my history. For years, despite my parents sending resources from the East and my uncle giving me the best medicines to temper my body, I had barely scraped into the 9th rank. I was famous for having a useless body for martial arts. A few days ago, I had a realization. I explained, keeping my tone calm. I was practicing the basic saber techniques, and something just clicked. I found a new understanding, and my cultivation broke through naturally. I didn't tell them everything. I needed to stop hiding. If I wanted to rise quickly, I needed the full support of the Marquis's resources. Xiaqian's expression turned grave. "Show me," he commanded. "You had an epiphany through the basic saber techniques?" Our family's basic technique wasn't some low-level trash. It was the result of 600 years of refinement, modeled after the Imperial family's strongest 9th-rank styles. It was perfected. No one had been able to improve it for generations. Not my uncle, not my father, not even the Marquis himself. "Get me a saber," I said to a servant. "Use mine," Xiaqian interrupted. He pulled a long, pitch-black saber from his waist. The moment the blade left its sheath, the air grew cold. For a split second, I saw a vision, a black flood dragon leaping from an abyss, its scales dark enough to swallow a man's soul. It was a divine weapon, forged in the blood of a high-level demon and imbued with its spirit. I gripped the hilt with both hands. It was incredibly heavy. If I were still at the 9th rank, I wouldn't have been able to even swing it. The weight itself was a test. I held it steady. My uncle nodded, a spark of anticipation in his eyes. He realized I wasn't lying. I closed my eyes and let my blood boil. I felt the energy within me surge. Behind me, a faint shadow of a rising sun appeared. The air around us began to hum. My aunt, Chui Mingru, gasped. As a practitioner of the occult arts, she was sensitive to energy. She watched as I drew the essence of extreme yang into my body, funneling it directly into the black blade. Sun-piercing, demon-breaking saber. I warred. I stood in the middle of the garden, but in my mind, I was facing 10,000 demons. My spirit reached its peak. I swung the blade with everything I had. The world seemed to change color. A brilliant, blinding light flashed like a miniature sun. My uncle didn't flinch. He reached out a single hand and caught the terrifying wave of energy, snuffing out the light before it could destroy the garden. But his eyes told the whole story. I had done the impossible. My uncle's hand remained firm, having absorbed the full force of my strike. Although the blast hadn't even scratched his skin, I couldn't hide the joy on my face. My heart was pounding. I had actually done it. You really modified the basic saber technique? Xiaoqian asked. His voice was sharp, questioning, but his eyes told a different story. He believed me. He had seen it with his own eyes. The strike I just performed looked nothing like the basic forms, yet the essence was the same. It was pure. It drew in the essence of the sun, condensing it into a murderous intent that would make any evil spirit flee. It wasn't just a way to kill enemies. It was a way to temper the body itself. My aunt, Chui Mingru, was the first to voice the truth. She looked at the black blade, her mind racing. To her, the killing power of the technique was secondary. The real miracle was how it connected a martial artist to the energy of heaven and earth. Usually, only occult practitioners could do that. This technique, it draws the sun's essence to refine the flesh, she whispered, her voice trembling. How can a common martial artist achieve this? She was stunned. In this world, the mix of martial arts and occult energy was unheard of. My uncle, though not a practitioner himself, quickly realized the implications. The path of a martial artist through the 9th, 8th, and 7th ranks is all about building the physical body. But since martial artists can't normally tap into worldly energy, they have to rely on years of grueling labor or rare, expensive herbs. My new technique changed everything. It provided a shortcut, a way to skyrocket through the ranks by feeding on the sun itself. Xiaoqian's expression turned dead serious. He looked around at the servants and maids standing nearby. Keep this a secret, he commanded. Not a word of this technique leaves this courtyard. Luckily, these were the family's most trusted retainers. If they weren't, my uncle would have likely silenced them permanently right then and there. I'll leave everything to you, uncle, I said without a hint of hesitation. I had revealed my secret for a reason. I needed resources to grow, and I knew the Marquis's manor had spent a fortune on me over the years. Giving this technique to the family was a fair trade. Good, Xiaoqian said, his voice booming with pride. Chunner, you have done a great service for the family. I will report your merit to the Hall of Elders. You are also free to go to the Scripture Pavilion and choose any new manual you desire. As for your request to work outside the manor, I will make the arrangements. The Xia family had survived for 600 years because they rewarded merit fairly. They never turned their backs on someone who brought glory to the clan. I let out a long breath and smiled. I didn't care about the fame. I just wanted out. The Marquis's manor was a golden cage. It was powerful, but it wasn't mine. To survive the coming storm, I had to build my own foundation. I would use the family's influence to get a high-ranking official post. Why climb from the bottom when I could take the shortcut? I was never the type of person to suffer for the sake of suffering. While my uncle took me to the Hall of Elders to record my contribution, life was moving elsewhere in the capital. East of the Imperial Palace, a grand but understated mansion sat on the main road. This was the residence of the second princess, Yao Guang. She was in the prime of her youth, and unlike her sisters, she was fiercely independent. She had moved out of the palace months ago, a move that broke every royal tradition. No one knew what she had told the emperor to get his permission, but the court soon learned the price: her betrothal to me, the useless son of the marquis. Inside the princess's front hall, 3 women and 2 men sat in tense silence. Their eyes kept drifting to a yellow silk scroll resting on a side table. The Imperial decree. At the head of the room sat Princess Yao Guang. She was breathtaking. Her skin was like fine jade, her eyes like distant stars, and her black hair flowed like a dark waterfall. She was so beautiful that everyone else in the room, man or woman, seemed to fade into the background. Princess, a woman in the corner finally snapped, breaking the silence. Xia Chun is a nobody in the Marquis's manor. He's ignored and talentless. You are a daughter of heaven. How can he possibly be worthy of you? Yao Guang's expression didn't change. Her eyes remained calm, showing neither joy nor anger. What is done, she replied simply. The woman fell silent. The emperor's decree had been announced to the world. There was no going back. What if we send an assassin? A man on the left suggested, his voice low. I hear he isn't even liked in his own home. His father has been at the eastern frontier for 14 years and barely writes to him. No one would care if he disappeared. Ridiculous, another man barked. This was Hua Qiming, a scholar from the Imperial Academy. Assassination is a coward's tool. Whether it succeeds or fails, it brings nothing but disaster. He turned to the princess. Xia Chun might have a useless body, but he is still the eldest legitimate son of the Marquis. This marriage is the emperor's way of securing the Marquis's loyalty. Even if Xia Chun dies, the emperor will just pick another son from the manor to take his place. The princess would still be wed off. The first man, Su Jun, glared at the scholar, but he kept his mouth shut in front of the princess. Yao Guang listened to them argue, but deep down, she was disappointed in Su Jun. She had recruited these men as advisors, but it was clear who had the sharper mind. Assassination was a tool, yes, but using it on the son of a marquis over a marriage? It was amateurish. In her world, if every problem could be solved by killing, the world would have burned down a long time ago. If the world could be fixed just by killing, it would have been a pile of ash a long time ago. My family, the Marquis of Jindong's manor, isn't just any noble house. We are the backbone of the military. My grandfather, Xia Chutian, was a legend. 36 years ago, he led 200,000 men and crushed the famous General Xiao Yu, marching within 30 miles of the enemy capital. He was a god of war, but he was also smart. After that victory, he gave up his military power voluntarily to avoid the emperor's suspicion. That move saved our family and paved the way for the next generation. My uncles, Xia Qian and Xia Yuan, became the new leaders of the military. Xia Qian won glory against the southern tribes before retiring to manage the manor. My father, Xia Yuan, spent 14 years guarding the eastern border. For 13 years, people thought he was average because he didn't seek flashy victories. Then, a month ago, he lured out and slaughtered a third-rank great demon. One family, 3 legendary commanders. It's no wonder the royal family is terrified of us. But in a world this chaotic, the emperor can't afford to suppress us. He has to win us over. That's why assassination was never an option for the princess. To her, I was just a useless body, not worth the risk of a scandal. She wanted more than a marriage. She wanted the throne. She wanted to be the first empress in history. While she was dreaming of power, I was deep inside the Marquis's manor. I stood inside a magnificent 7-story ancient tower. This was the Merit Tower, the heart of our family's legacy. The basic saber technique, it's actually been improved. 7 old men with snow-white hair stared at me. Some had jumped out of their seats. One accidentally plucked out a strand of his beard. Another let his tea spill all over his robes. These were the clan elders, the hidden pillars of the Xia family. Basic techniques are the foundation of everything. Your future potential depends entirely on how you start. Our family saber style had been passed down for 600 years. It was our greatest secret, refined by generations of masters. They thought it was perfect. They thought it couldn't be touched. Then I showed up. I showed them the scorched crack in the floor from my sun-piercing strike. I had just demonstrated the new forms right in front of them. Good. Incredible, the man at the head of the table shouted. He was Xiaoyu, my eldest granduncle. He laughed loudly, but I saw the flash of regret in his eyes. Your martial talent might be poor, but your comprehension is godlike. Your contribution to the clan today is greater than even your father's. He looked pained. To him, it was a tragedy. Heaven had given me the brain of a genius but the body of a weakling. If I had both, the Xia family would have ruled the world. My other granduncle, Xia Xian, nodded in agreement. Our family already had 3 marquee titles. We didn't need more military medals. What we needed was a way to make our descendants stronger and faster. My discovery changed the game for every Xia child born from now on. I eventually left the Merit Tower. To be honest, it was my first time ever stepping inside. It was also the first time I had met those 7 old men in 17 years. They told me my name would be written in the ancestral history books. They said I'd be honored for eternity. I didn't care about that. I didn't need fame after I was dead. I needed power while I was alive. I walked through the winding paths of the backyard and past the martial arts field. It was buzzing with energy. 5-year-olds were practicing punches. Teenagers were swinging spears that flashed like cold lightning. One boy was drenched in sweat, lifting a massive boulder that weighed 1,000 pounds. Brother Chun, a boy about 13 years old, dropped his boulder and sprinted toward me. He moved with the agility of a mountain ape, closing the distance in seconds. He was Xiaowen, my cousin. His father was a scholar who wanted him to be a man of letters, but Xiaowen was a martial prodigy who hated books. Brother Chun, did you come to see me practice? He asked, rubbing his head and grinning like a fool. He was one of the few people in this house who didn't look at me with pity or contempt. He knew I couldn't cultivate, but he didn't care. To him, I was just his big brother. I smiled at Xiaowen's enthusiasm. He was a natural martial artist, but his father, my third uncle Xia Han, was a scholar. When it became clear I had no talent for the blade, Xia Han took me under his wing. He taught me to read, hoping I'd find the noble spirit of a Confucian scholar. Because of that, I spent most of my childhood in my third uncle's courtyard. I grew up with his kids. They were the only family members who truly treated me like one of their own. I'm heading to the archive tower to pick out a new technique, I told him, patting his shoulder. I thought I'd stop by and see how your training is going. I looked around the massive field. In the Marquis manner, every child, boy or girl, started training at age 5. They worked through the heat and the snow without fail. I used to be one of them. My uncle Xia Qian had given me a special pass to skip the drills to save my pride, but I was stubborn back then. I had stayed, gritting my teeth, until I watched everyone my age leave me in the dust. Eventually, the shame became too much, and I stopped coming. Now, the faces on the field were mostly strangers. The kids I grew up with were gone. Most had already broken through to the 8th rank essence refining realm. In our family, rank mattered more than age. Once you hit the 8th rank, you were sent into the military to prove your worth. Brother Chun, you're here. A young girl about 10 years old ran over, her face flushed from practicing her forms. This was Xia Yushi, the daughter of Xia Qian and my aunt Chui Mengru. Behind her, a group of other cousins and disciples from the branch families followed. They all greeted me politely. Some were genuinely happy to see me, while others just nodded with neutral expressions. Nobody mocked me. In a family that had lasted 600 years, respect for elders was drilled into our souls. Even if they thought I was a useless body, I was still their senior brother. Plus, word had spread that I was now the Imperial consort. No one was stupid enough to insult the man marrying the future empress. I greeted them all with a warm smile, but my mind was elsewhere. I looked at a cold-faced boy named Xia Yichen and another named Xia Haoyu. My heart raced. I knew these names. In the future, these boys would become legendary generals who commanded the Iron Cavalry and dominated the eastern wastelands. Right now, they were just kids with dirt on their faces. Are you going out for a trial, Brother Chin? Xiaowen asked, his eyes shining. I told him I was. I'm almost at the 8th rank myself, Xiaowen bragged, grinning. Once I break through, I'm coming to find you. I was stunned. Xiaowen wasn't even 12 yet. To be that close to the 8th rank was incredible. He was going to be one of the brightest stars of the Xia family. A golden age was coming. 600 years of family luck was about to explode into a new era of power, and I had to be ready to lead it. I finally reached the archive tower. It was a massive 7-story building. I had only been here once before to learn basic saber moves, but today was different. Because of the contribution I'd made with the new breathing technique, I had permission to enter any floor below the 6th. I didn't rush to the top. I started on the 1st floor. I walked to a shelf and pulled down a book titled Cold Wind Sword Technique. I flipped through the pages, but I wasn't reading. Record technique, I whispered in my mind. A progress bar appeared in my vision. 1%, 25, 100. I moved through the aisles like a tourist, barely glancing at the scrolls, but my system was working overtime. I was downloading the entire library. The 1st floor was packed with thousands of basic manuals. I grabbed the most important ones and moved to the 2nd floor. This floor was for the 8th rank. It had everything: swords, sabers, spears, and even body tempering methods. There were even scrolls on military formations. I focused on those. In this world, a single powerful martial artist was scary, but a disciplined army using a killing array could slaughter even the strongest masters. Most of these were small formations, 3 or 5 people. The really powerful ones, the ones that allowed a general to lead 10,000 men and kill a god, were likely hidden on the 5th floor or higher. There were probably fewer than 10 families in the entire Great Wu Empire who possessed those secrets. Deep in the shadows of the tower, 2 old men watched me. They were my 4th and 6th granduncles, the guardians of the archive. They exchanged a confused look. They had seen many geniuses enter these halls, but they had never seen anyone study by flipping through books as fast as a deck of cards. The 2 old men were clearly tracking my every move. They knew I had modified the basic saber techniques, so they were watching me with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "What is he doing?" Xiaohong whispered, his brow furrowed. After 70 years of martial arts experience, he couldn't wrap his head around my behavior. "He's just glancing at them like he's looking at flowers in a garden." "You're asking me?" Xiao Huang replied, his beard twitching with irritation. "How should I know?" They watched as I moved from shelf to shelf. Xiao Huang shook his head, already forming a judgment. He thought I was being impulsive. To him, a true martial artist needed a singular focus and an iron will. He saw my rapid-fire page flipping as a sign of a restless mind. "It's a pity," Xiao Hong sighed, turning his gaze away. "No wonder Xia Yuan ignores this boy and pours all his effort into the younger son, Xia Hao. The boy has talent, but his heart isn't steady. He'll never achieve anything great like this." I didn't care what they thought. If I knew they were judging me, I would have laughed. While I looked calm on the outside, I was ecstatic. My vision was swimming with notifications. Row after row of progress bars hit 100%. I wasn't just reading. I was emptying the entire archive into my mind. An hour passed. I finished the 2nd floor and moved to the 3rd. The collection here was smaller but much higher in quality. I even found Buddhist sutras and Taoist scriptures tucked away in a special corner. Most people in this era saw these as mere philosophy or religious chanting. They didn't know what was coming. When the spiritual energy of the world eventually awakened, these ordinary texts would become supreme cultivation methods. Someone would read the Lohan Sutra and unlock a god-tier breathing technique. Another would study the Taoist peace scripture and visualize a celestial palace, stepping into the transcendent realm instantly. I didn't hesitate. I recorded every single one of them. I swept through the 3rd and 4th floors without leaving a single book behind. Finally, I reached the 5th floor. This space was massive, but it held only 100 manuals. These were the crown jewels of the Marquis Manor. I noticed the recording speed slowed down here. On the 1st floor, a book took 3 seconds. Here, it took nearly 2 minutes per scroll. I stayed patient. I found military formation manuals designed for 1,000 soldiers, techniques that could harvest the collective strength of an army to slay masters. I also found Confucian calligraphy and paintings. To a scholar, these were art. To me, they were vessels of noble qi and hidden intent. I recorded them all. Once the progress bars finally finished, I decided it was time to put on a show. I picked up a body tempering manual called the Red Sheep Body Refinement Art. I sat down and pretended to read it intensely. System, deduce the technique and instill it. I commanded internally. A new bar appeared. 5%, 35, 78. The process took 3 minutes. Suddenly, my skin began to burn. It felt like molten lava was circulating through my veins. My bones and muscles felt like they were being hammered on an anvil by a divine blacksmith, forcing out every impurity. Inside my mind, a miniature sun rose. The sun-piercing intent I had learned earlier fused with this new body-refining essence. My blood grew thick and heavy, radiating a searing heat. The temperature on the 5th floor skyrocketed until it felt like the middle of a desert summer. I felt like a piece of steel fresh from the forge. Whoosh! Xiaohong and Xiaohuang appeared in front of me instantly. Their faces were masks of pure shock. He's already mastered the essence of the red sheep art? Xiaohong gasped. In a few minutes? They knew this technique well. It was powerful enough to be useful even for 4th-rank masters. They had been watching me play around with books all day, and then, in the blink of an eye, I had achieved a breakthrough that should have taken years. Their brains couldn't process the logic of it. I slowly opened my eyes. The glow in my pupils faded, and the heat radiating from my skin pulled back into my pores. I looked up and acted surprised. 4th granduncle? 6th granduncle? What are you doing here? I asked, trying to look as innocent as possible. How did you learn that so fast? Xiaohong blurted out. He wasn't one for pleasantries. I rubbed the back of my head, playing the part of the naive youth. I don't know. I was just looking at it, and suddenly, I just felt it. Xiaohong looked like he wanted to scream. You just felt it? That's it. Xiaohuang didn't say a word. He stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. He sent a surge of true qi through my body to inspect me. He checked my meridians, looking for any sign of dark magic or hidden pills. He found nothing but a rock-solid foundation and an incredibly powerful physique. Your skeletal structure is average, Xiaohuang muttered, sounding confused. You shouldn't be a martial arts genius. This makes no sense. Why did you pick this specific book? And what were you doing earlier, flipping through everything like a madman? I lowered my head, acting embarrassed. I heard that the ancient sages read thousands of books to create their own paths. I wanted to try and follow in their footsteps, even if I'm not that capable. As for this book, it felt similar to the saber technique I practiced earlier. It just clicked. Xiaohuang let out a sudden, loud burst of laughter. You? Following the path of the ancient sages. You're just a boy. He laughed for a long time before realizing he might be hurting my feelings. He cleared his throat and turned serious. Listen, you're young. You don't have the experience to study everything at once. You need to focus on one path. If you learn too many things, you'll ruin your foundation and your mind. It's dangerous. I nodded quickly, looking like a student taking a lecture. Your talent for martial arts might be plain, Xiaohuang added, his voice softening. But your comprehension is extraordinary. Keep this focus, and you might actually become someone one day. Xiaohong gave me a few more words of encouragement. I bowed and thanked him. We stayed in the pavilion for a while longer, and both elders were surprisingly patient. They shared specific tips on cultivation and warned me about the dangers of rushing my progress. I listened to every word, acting the part of the grateful student. Finally, I excused myself and walked out. As I left the library pavilion, I didn't look back. I didn't see the expression on Xiaohong's face as he watched me go. He let out a long, heavy sigh. He told Xiaohuang it was a tragedy. To him, my comprehension was monstrous, almost demonic, but my body was still a waste. He felt the heavens were being cruel. Why didn't we let this boy follow the path of a scholar? Xiaohong muttered. He kept repeating the question, his voice filled with regret. He remembered me following my third uncle, Xiaohan, when I was just a child. He believed that with my mind, I could have cultivated the noble spirit of the Confucian path. I could have become a great scholar. Xiaohuang looked just as pained. He felt like a great future had been wasted. For 600 years, the Xia family had been nothing but a pack of vulgar martial artists. The scholars at court always looked down on us. They used their status to suppress our family at every turn. If I had become a literary giant, it would have changed our entire destiny. It would have brought balance to our house. Xiaohong remained silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. He reminded Xiaohuang about my father. Years ago, my father had sent a letter back from the blood-soaked battlefields of the Eastern Desolation. His instructions were clear and uncompromising. My father had insisted that his son must be a warrior. He didn't care if I had a useless body. He said that even if I was destined to die in the dirt of a battlefield, I should die with a saber in my hand. I was never meant to hold a pen. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the library pavilion. The two elders stood there in the shadows, lost in the memory of a choice that had already been made.